When I wrote my first book, Surti, it was very heavily influenced by science, my interest in science. So, and also I was, because science, the level of science I was involved was fundamental science, where you are interested to explore. So not only I incorporated kind of scientific stuff, but I also explored the type of poetry being written, the most recent in Canada or in world, whatever, in English. So that also influenced my poetry. So I ended up writing a book which is considered the first postmodernist poetry book in Punjabi, and also first to introduce concrete poetry, computer poetry, and stuff like that. This is the first edition, and you can see the artist who made a kind of mysterious picture on it of a universe or something. I wasn't here, it was just in Punjab. But then ਜਿਵੇਂ ਆਹ ਕਵਿਤਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਦੋਨੋਂ ਬੁੱਧੂ, ਸੁੱਚਾ ਜੱਟ ਬਸ ਜੱਟ ਦਾ ਜੱਟ, ਖੇਤਾਂ ਅੰਦਰ ਮਿੱਲਾਂ ਅੰਦਰ ਭੱਠੀਆਂ ਅੰਦਰ ਜੱਟ ਦਾ ਜੱਟ, ਆਈਨਸਟਾਈਨ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਗਿਆਨੀ, ਨਿਰਾ ਗਿਆਨੀ, ਨਿਰਾ ਧਿਆਨੀ, ਬਸ ਵਿਗਿਆਨੀ. ਸੋ ਯੂ ਕੈਨ ਸੀ ਦਾ ਆਈਨਸਟਾਈਨ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਨਾ ਸਾਇੰਸ 'ਚ. ਚੋਰੀ ਦਾ ਧੰਦਾ ਚੋਰੀ ਯਾਰੀ, ਚਿੱਟੇ ਵਸਤਰ ਕਾਲੇ ਵਸਤਰ, ਘੂਰੀ ਵੱਟ, ਹੱਸ ਮੁਸਕਰਾ ਕੇ ਚੋਰੀ ਯਾਰੀ, ਸੁੱਚਾ ਜੱਟ ਤੇ ਆਈਨਸਟਾਈਨ ਦੋਨੋਂ ਸਕੇ ਭਰਾ, ਦੋਨੋਂ ਬੁੱਧੂ ਹੁਣ ਅੱਖਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਲਾਲੀ ਭਰ ਕੇ ਸੋਚ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਚੋਰ ਅਜੇ ਵੀ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਲੁਕਿਆ, ਗੁੱਝੀ ਹਾਸੀ ਹੱਸ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ. They are both being exploited by the exploiters. The farmers now, the most vivid example is now in India, how the farmers, and then most of the scientists are kind of governed by the corporations, big corporations or governments. So they are both kind of, as I said, Buddhu, and the chor is the people who steal their doings. Anyway, so you can see the influence of science, right? So ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੀ ਆਹ ਪੋਮ ਹੈ, ਕਿਣਕਾ ਹੈ ਅੰਦਰ ਜਾਣ ਦਾ ਰਾਹ ਲੱਭ ਗਿਆ ਤਾਂ ਉਮਰ ਭਰ ਸੈਰ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਕਾਫੀ ਹੈ. So this is like a physicist, it's inspired by physics. If you can really get into the atom, you can spend lives, not only one life, exploring the inner workings of the atom. So this is the poem, again influenced by science. Incidentally, this poem now, probably I'm not sure if you read that, it's one of the 7 international poems in English. Bill Gates, yeah, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਵਾਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਆਫਿਸ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਸੀ, ਆਫਿਸ ਬਿਲਡਿੰਗ ਹਿਊਜ in Seattle. So they made a public wall outside, and in bronze they put 7 poems. So this is one of them from the international poetry. They picked it up from a website, India's website, and then they invited me there, and then we had pictures with Bill Gates, whatever its importance. Yeah, Bill Gates didn't really honestly interest me much. I know who he is and what kind of poem I have already read to you. Bill Gates of one of them, right? But the poem was picked by Michael Wiegers. He is now executive editor of poetry in Seattle, somewhere, not in Seattle, but I forgot the name of the town. It's a Copper Canyon Publishing, and he's the chief editor there. So Bill Gates and people hired him to pick up the poems. Of course, they wouldn't know which was a good one. So he picked 2 of my poems. And that was a great honor actually. And like if I went to Michael Wieger or heard of him, I would be reluctant to talk to him. It's kind of his awe, his name. It's a big. But then he picked my poems, and then he writes me an email that I am fan of your poetry. So that's what I liked. That's a validation from such a critic and scholar. And so first they had decided to put 50 poems, and he picked 2 of mine for these 50. That was again very encouraging. And the second poem was all against rich. I don't know why he picked it. I was so surprised. It's very clearly against rich people who are exploiting Africans. It's that poem. It's in my book. And he picked that one. I don't know how he could do that. So that gave me an idea about Michael Wieger, how nice or how good he is. So I was glad, but not due to Bill Gates, although I found it quite different than the general impression is. So Michael told me that he's a bit different than normal rich people. And so he was just standing like that when first they didn't know if he would come. It's a security thing. It's a very, big name. So, but he did happen to come there. And then Michael told me on phone that you might be able to meet him and shake hand. Maybe, I think it's okay. And I told Michael that I'm not, keen to shake hand with Bill Gates. How does it make any difference to me? It's, so big difference or whatever. He said, no, it's a bit different. He likes arts, and he promotes art. So I took journalism with me, and so we went there. There was a huge security. But then somehow the manager who was managing all these things, they called me, and I took journal if we want to have a picture with Bill Gates. And how could I say no? That would be so rude. He wouldn't care. But then we had the picture. It was nice. And Melinda Gates was standing somewhere there. Then she came quickly and said, I want to be in it too. So that was pretty good. And that's the story kind of this thing. But I never contacted them again though. I took a course at UBC in painting, okay, just out of fun. It was Bettina Lewis, I think, was the teacher. So one day she asked us to make a painting in 10 minutes. So everybody was surprised. How can you finish in 10 minutes? We just try to do something. Then she said, do a painting in 5 minutes. Everybody laughed, but surprisingly enough, there are so many young students. I was older one, but they were able to do something which looked like painting. I got inspired. So when I came home, I told Bettina that I'm going to write a poem in 10 minutes. She says, forget it. How can you write a poem in 10 minutes? The painting is different. In the poem, the ideas are involved, and of course other things. But anyway, I came that day and wrote 10 poems in 1 hour. And they read quite okay. Some of them are here too. And of course, you can revise them later. So I wrote a whole lot actually after, again, I wrote. Then I wrote in 5 minutes. And when I was doing that, Navtej happened to come here. He said, "What are you doing these things?" I said, "I'm just experimenting with the psychology of poetry. How fast, your brain can work to write poetry. It's just fun." He said, "Strangely enough, I'm also doing that." So that's how a common book, idea of a common book originated. First, they were 10-minute poems. We just, thought of including in the book, the whole book. And I think the name we thought was Abhinandan. But then our interest became deeper and deeper, and so over a year, 2 years, we thought, no, that's no fun. So we took it seriously. And then the first edition is sitting somewhere there. That one is the first edition. This is 2 years ago now published again, because that was gone pretty quick. And that's more than 1,000 pages. This is 1,200 something pages. So you can ask lots of questions. Why a big volume? We could make 10, 12 books out of that, normal 12 books of poetry. So we wanted to make a statement with the big size that poetry matters. It was kind of it was becoming kind of prevalent view that poetry is going out. It's a fiction, it's a novels. No, we wanted to make that statement that poetry matters. So we make the big size, and we can spend money on it, we can spend energy. And wherever I do a reading, English reading, I show this book there also, just to make a statement. And then we did lots of experimentation first in Punjabi. The first was that it's the poem, every poem is equal, whether it's 2 lines, whether it's 10 pages. So we put every poem, however small, on a new page, separate page. It's not to increase the number of pages, it's a philosophy that every poem matters and has equal importance. So to do that further, we didn't put any categories in the Navtej poem. This is my poem, this is sad poem, this is from Punjab, no category at all. So every poem is equal. Then the index we made is not which poem is on the first page. So the first poem starts with Uda. Usne keha, page 838. So it's not page 1 and 2 and 5 and 10. So that means we go alphabetical. Alphabetical means everything is equal. So that's another thing we try to teach Punjabi writing people, that no matter the size, doesn't matter. And then another thing what we did was, like, this is poem is first, writer is secondary. Our name doesn't happen here, it's at the end. And that too, what do you call this, the letters, initials. So we put initials. Just Nannapabba means Navtej Bharti, Adarara means my name, Ajmer Rode. So you could see we gave minimum importance to the writer, and it's the poem that matters. So that was another thing, like this one. We copied it from Guru Granth Sahib actually, just 2 lines at the end. Then what we did was another new thing. Wherever there was more space, we put ancient scripts. written on tree barks or metals or wood, say 2000 years ago or 300, from all over the world. For example, this one is probably from Tibet or something. So we didn't put any information here. That means it's not for information what it is. Like now I don't understand, but just a graphic. So the reader has a poetic experience out of it, not the information. Information you can find from internet. So why would we give here in poetry? So these all the graphics, they're all scripts and the pre-scripts. So that was another thing new. And if you do want to know about it, then in the beginning we have given that information in the beginning, that on this page लीला ਵਿੱਚ ਆਏ ਲਿਪੀ ਚਿੱਤਰ ਅਤੇ ਵਰਣ ਚਿੱਤਰ. So you can find it from here. So what we did this time, wherever there was more space, because we increased the spaces, we put a poet, nowhere where, from Greek or German or Africa or India, who has, or whether woman or man, who has gone beyond, whose influence has gone beyond his or her country and his or her language. So which has influenced the total poetical tradition of the world. So we put some of these, about I think 50 names, like Kalidas is there from India. There are some more because we couldn't help. Guru Nanak Dev Ji is there. Farid, I'm not sure, I think is there. And then Tagore didn't make it too because it's too modern. Then of course Ramayana writer and Mahabharata, they of course are very big, and Panchtantra creator. So so these people are there in this new one. So there are some of the new things. It's not only size on this one. Community means all over the world, Punjabi readers. So we have wonderful comments. There were so many. Some of them we included here. I'll just read one or two. Now, Leela Bare Pratikarm, we just, at the end, of course, you know, this is Surjit Patar. ਮੈਨੂੰ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਹੈ ਲੀਲਾ ਸਾਡੀ 20ਵੀਂ ਸਦੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਮਹੱਤਵਪੂਰਨ ਕਾਵਿ ਪੁਸਤਕਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਹੈ. ਇਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੋਹਨ ਦੀ, ਵਿੰਨਣ ਦੀ, ਮੰਥਨ ਦੀ, ਝੰਜੋੜਨ ਦੀ ਅਲੋਕਾਰ ਸ਼ਕਤੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ. ਅਤੇ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਆਹ ਹੈਗਾ ਅਨਾਦ ਫਾਊਂਡੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਿੱਲੀ, ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਸਾਹਿਤ ਦੇ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੀਲਾ ਵਰਗੀ ਹੋਰ ਕੋਈ ਪੁਸਤਕ ਨਹੀਂ. ਦਿਸ ਵਰ 5 people including a vice chancellor, ਦਿੱਲੀ ਸਕਾਲਰ ਹਰਭਜਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਦਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਨ. ਅਤੇ ਐਨੀਵੇ ਪੁਸਤਕ ਜਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਵੇਂ ਪਸਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਨੁਭਵ ਕਰਨ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਪ੍ਰਯੋਗ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਇੰਨਾ ਸਾਹਸ ਹੋਵੇ. ਲੀਲਾ ਨੂੰ ਠੀਕ ਹੀ ਮਹਾਂਕਾਵਿਕ ਅਤੇ ਸਦੀਵੀ ਕਲਾਸਿਕ ਕਿਹਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ. ਸੋ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਤੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰਤੀਕਰਮ ਹੈ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਆਇਆ. This is very natural for a writer to explore about the mainstream language or literature. So I think you can't help reading English, because I could read English. So besides, it's a beautiful, powerful language. English is like Punjabi, Hindi. English is a very rhythmical and musical language. Ing alone makes it so musical, you know, going, coming, doing, You can see the nasal voice. So, and then as I said before, I had no prejudices, like English is imperialistic language and it's killing the other, suppressing the other. I think we shouldn't blame the language. It's the users, people who use it to do that. It's not the language. And also another argument in my mind was that there are millions of poor mothers for whom it's a mother tongue children. There's millions of blacks who use English. So what do you call them? Imperialistic. Their language. It's now their language. So I think it's very wrong to have a prejudice against any language. It's true, it's expanding, it's probably pushing other languages to the corners maybe, but it's not the fault of the language. I think we have to remember that. It's for example, in Punjab, if it's expanding, it's the Punjabi people who think that they won't get any jobs with reading Punjabi. So the English would get them jobs or whatever. That's the reason. Here, if you want to get into mainstream, English is the language. So I joined the Writers Union of Canada, and it was a wonderful experience. I was a bit shy though, and there was a bit of racism to start with. So we had to make a racial minority writers committee. When I was a member of the Writers Union of Canada, I am still a member actually, but not active. I was very active in '94. Actually, I was on the executive. And the same year, I think I was also chair of the BC section of the Writers Union, chair or representative, whatever you call. So I was quite a bit involved in the Writers Union activities. And there were native writers, Aboriginal writers. So Aboriginal writers felt that there's a cultural appropriation happening in the Writers Union and outside, of course, the union. So the white writers and white painters, they would go and take the native stories and the scenes, paint them, and then publish them under their name, make money. So that was the problem, that if you go into a native cultures, write stories, give credit to them also, rather give them the credit. So it's appropriation of culture, that you take the story, their stories, and put it under your name and make money, especially money. It's not only selling. Writers get grants from Canada Council. So they would say, okay, I'm writing a book on native stories, this and that, and they'll get say 20,000 grant. So this is all appropriation. That's what. So we formed a committee. It was a Racial Minority Writers Committee. I was a member. Our chair was Kishig Lenore. She was native, very evocative, very expressive young woman. And so we raised our voice. Of course, there were 6 people in the core committee. There were hundreds of people, other racial minority writers, not hundreds, maybe 50, 60, but 6 of them were the executive kind of committee. So we decided to hold a conference on appropriation of culture, cultural appropriation. So luckily, the mainstream writers, they supported it, and we got money from the government, and we held the conference in 1992 in Orillia, Ontario, in the north. And they contributed, the mainstream writers, white writers who had money, they even contributed. And we had the condition that no white writer or journalist would be allowed to the conference, so that they can openly discuss against, if they have to speak against them, they should be able to speak against white writers. So there were 2 days, I think, conference, 2 or 3 days. And Surjit and I went there. Surjit was also a member. So when we came back, there a lot happened there, and when we came back, we had to present a resolution to the executive body of the Writers' Union. The people who would prepare the resolution, which would be very, very, very important, because it could break the Writers' Union, break up ho sakdi sigi. So there was Lenore, myself were from the Racial Minority Writers Committee, and you know who sent the white writers, who they sent? Margaret Atwood and another philosopher who was teaching writer. So when Margaret Atwood came, we were frankly intimidated, kind of, we could hardly speak to her, she was so big. And so anyway, we started talking, and eventually the 3 of us left, and we went on for 4 hours on that resolution, because we wanted to put that, first we wanted to put in the resolution that white writers shouldn't be allowed to write and paint about the native Aboriginal people stories. So Margaret Atwood, who is very famous but who also happens to be very intelligent, she prevailed. She convinced me, at least. She said, she knew the name of Pash. I think I had already told her or talked about Pash, Punjabi poet, revolutionary poet, who was killed. She says, if you want to, Pash had been killed at that time, if you want to write openly about Pash, you would hesitate, because somebody can kill you or can harm you. But she says, I can go there and write. We can go and write. So when you say that the white writers shouldn't be allowed to write about natives, it's wrong. So we changed our mind, and then we put that any writer, any artist is free to express herself or himself, but should respect the respective culture. She or he should respect it, and because so that got passed. But before that, when we said no, then it was so difficult for white writers, because they would get grants on that, and that would be gone. So it was a very kind of a difficult situation for the union. So anyway, that's how it happened. Then I wrote about it for the union, about how the appropriation thing went and all that. So that was my participation in that. Actually, after that, they took me into the executive committee, a writer of color, and instead of Lenore, and it's something. Lenore came with the what do you call wing, you know, the eagle feather. I'm sorry. She came with a feather. That's their tradition. She gave it to me while we were sitting in the executive meeting, and she said, "Brother," she always called me brother. "Brother, here is the feather, and it will help you. It will help us." That was their tradition, but it felt good. That's nice. So that's how everything went in the Writers' Union at that time in the 90s. And after that, lots of people, writers of color, became members of the Writers Union. It opened up. Before that, it was Women's Committee who fought for women, discrimination against women, and they were so successful. They abandoned the committee. Then they said we no longer need it, because most of the time the president would become a woman, would become a president. It just came up. It was very nice. So they thought similarly about the Racial Minority Writers Committee, and most of the writers who were supporting us very vigorously were white. Chair of the Writers Union, Susan Green, and others. So anyway, that's the story of the Writers Union. And why I joined it, it was quite inspiring to meet big name in literature and writers other than your own language. So it was, and every year there would be annual gathering function where a new president would be chosen. So we would work for first 2 days on resolutions, workshops, this and that. Third day was fun. It was so nice. We used to really enjoy that fun night, drinking this and that, dance and dinner. So I think it's a great institution, still going on, but I have withdrawn just to write more, to spend more time on writing.